We're going to talk Everton in light of the news yesterday, the 10-point deduction. I'm delighted to say that Rodger Armstrong joins us on the line. Rodger is a lifelong Evertonian who contributes to a number of podcasts on Everton. And Rodger, it's a shame that the circumstances aren't any better in which we talk, but it's good to talk to you today. Thank you for giving us your time.
Thanks, Paul. You always seem to come up with the right music before we speak. I mean, karma. What are you trying to make a point there?
Well, you know, you could read something into that, couldn't you? You really could. Clearly, many Evertonians shocked by the 10-point deduction handed down to the football club yesterday. What was your reaction, Rodger, on hearing the news?
Those who know me and my views on the club, I'm one of those half-empty Evertonians. There's quite a few of us, particularly those of us of a certain age. So I was expecting a sanction to come through. But like many, I was surprised at the size of it. I didn't think we'd get away, in inverted commas, with just a fine or perhaps a transfer ban, or even that any punishment would be suspended, because I think the Premier League is clearly playing politics here. And they're trying to sort of demonstrate the fact that they're decisive, that they will take punitive action, that they have teeth, if you will, in the face of the impending independent regulator. But, 10 points, it's a sporting sanction. It's not a financial sanction. It's a sporting sanction taking place this season rather than in the seasons when the supposed or the confirmed breaches occurred. It does open up a whole can of worms, both for Everton and other clubs that suffered as a result of Everton's breaches. I was expecting a sanction, but perhaps not 10 points. I might have been predicting somewhere closer to half a dozen.
And just for those who possibly are not aware, the background to this is that English top-flight clubs, they are allowed to lose 105 million over 3 years, and an independent commission has found that Everton's losses to 2021 to 2022 amounted to 124.5 million. But my understanding, Rodger, is that if you spend money on infrastructure, the women's team, community schemes or the academy, then those costs can be excluded. And Everton, of course, are in the process of building the new stadium, and therefore they argue that the stadium costs should have been excluded from the calculations. Is that your understanding as well?
There are complexities around this, and some, it's down to accounting treatment, and it's down to what was kind of pre-planning costs, because you can't capitalise these costs until planning approval was gotten for the new stadium. I'm not an accountant, but there are complexities and nuances around the treatment of the data. What I would say, and what the Commission has said, is that Everton accepted that they were in breach of these profit and sustainability rules. And by the end of the hearing, Everton admitted that they were in breach to the tune of 9.7 million. The Commission found that breach was 19.5 million, and that difference is largely made up of by the treatment of said interest and which period it related to, whether that was pre or post planning. But there are questions that come out from the Commission that, perhaps Everton weren't entirely open whilst they were in dialogue with the Premier League, but perhaps some of the information they provided may have been disingenuous, may have been slightly inaccurate. And I think what really sticks in the throat of Evertonians is how grossly unfair a sporting sanction is, particularly on this manager, Sean Dyche, these players, and indeed the fans who've clearly done nothing wrong. The club clearly did not manage its money properly, didn't manage its finances properly. But the board that was in place at that time has actually left. The chairman has sadly passed away, and the owner, the current owner, Farhad Mashiri, is totally disinterested. Now, if there are people who are culpable for these breaches, it is those people, those officers, those directors of the club, none of whom were able to provide evidence, either out of choice or because they were excluded by some kind of confidentiality agreements, having left the club earlier in the year. So it's very, very unpalatable for fans to find the people who were meant to be the guards of the club to have behaved in a way that even saw us subject to an independent commission, and that those individuals who were responsible, formerly as directors of Everton Football Club, not being held to account. I think that's a really big issue for the fan base. The fan base who were treated rather poorly, shall we say, to their underestimation by that previous board, and accused of all kinds of things. So the fans are likely to be really quite livid about this, and justifiably so.
And so, in light of what you've just said, how likely do you think it is that Everton Football Club can successfully challenge this appeal?
I think it's very difficult, and I feel a great deal of sympathy, as well as with Sean Dyche and as well as the players. And there's no doubt that Sean is going to create a siege mentality. He's well suited to that, and there's no doubt there'll be real unity, even more unity than we've had recently across the fan base. You know, it's us against the world, that kind of mentality. And it suits Evertonians sometimes to take that approach, that bear pit attitude that you get at Goodison. It should lead to an atmosphere. As far as the club's concerned, I also have a great deal of sympathy for Colin Chong. Colin is, a lifelong Blue himself, and he's worked at the club for a long period of time. But he very bravely took on the role of interim CEO, and I felt yesterday, or when this news came out, and he had to make his statements, almost as if he was thrown under the bus, because it wasn't of his doing. You know, he wasn't party to what went on, and I feel really, really, really sympathetic for him. His statement was a little confusing, though. It may not have been that helpful, because to an extent he has, as the club had already done, admitted the crime, but really sought to dispute the time, as it were. So it's all about proportionality. It's about the size of that points deduction and whether a points deduction or a sporting sanction is fair, given the various mitigations, some of which are quite valid, that Everton argued around COVID and around the war in Ukraine, that saw us lose out on potential naming rights deals. And really, there is a case for some bad fortune, but there is also a case for serious mismanagement. And so those people who were responsible for it should really be held to account rather than the fans.
And as you say, it is the fans that will suffer. And, you know, you talk about the unity amongst the fan base. You talk about the unity now between the fans and the club, which is not something we've seen, of course, in recent months. And a determination for everybody now to fight this. Now, of course, Everton said that they were both shocked and disappointed and that they would appeal. They issued a statement in which they say the club does not recognise the finding that they failed to act with good faith. It doesn't understand this to have been an allegation made by the Premier League during the course of proceedings. And they say both the harshness and the severity of the sanction imposed by the Commission is neither fair nor a reasonable reflection of the evidence submitted. Now, of course, Rodger, this all comes at a time, doesn't it, when Farhad Moshiri is looking to sell the club. We believe that sale to 777 Partners is still going ahead. Is there a possibility, do you think, that this punishment could in any way hinder the sale of the club?
I don't think necessarily, but let me just pick up on some of those quotes you made there. I mean, I've read through that 41-page document, and some of the terms, some of the language used there is really quite spiteful towards Everton, and you can understand why the fan base think that the Premier League have got it in for them, because some of the language used about Everton not acting in good faith, when clearly they had been in quite collaborative discussions with the Premier League, I think is distinctly unfair. With regards to the sale of the club, I mean, the sale of the club has been agreed. It's now subject solely to the Premier League and the FCA saying that 777 are fit and proper potential owners for the football club. I, for one, am not convinced that they are. But they do have us rather by the short and curlies in terms of having provided us with ongoing funding to it's approved, then there are some additional financial difficulties for Everton as far as the price they may have to pay. I believe there was a bottom line price agreed, and that there would be supplementary monies paid to Moshiri should Everton avoid sanction, which they haven't done so far. Should Everton avoid relegation, which I think they still can do with a 10-point deduction. The quality of the three teams that came up last season, Luton, Burnley and Sheffield United, should see, even with a 10-point deduction, Everton able to survive. The real cat amongst the pigeons here is the potential for clubs like Leicester, Leeds, Southampton to sue, if our appeal is unsuccessful, to sue Everton for the damages they suffered, they would argue, by being relegated when Everton, survived by the skin of their teeth. And I think that is that could really be a most horrendous set of circumstances for the club to have to face up to. And in turn, that could affect any potential sale.
And of course, we're here to talk Everton, but let's not forget that Manchester City and also Chelsea, there are proceedings going on there as well. Manchester City, the only other club to have been charged by the Premier League for financial breaches when they were referred to the Independent Commission. And that was over more than 100 alleged rule breaches between 2009 and 2018. Now, we know that City were charged back in February. That case is still ongoing. And of course, Chelsea could also face further scrutiny as well over payments connected to the club's former owner, Roman Abramovich. So clearly, we're talking here about Everton, but all eyes are going to be on any punishment as well that will be handed down to both City and also Chelsea.
Well, I think that's true, and both boardrooms there will look probably with horror at what's happened to Everton, because a precedent undoubtedly has been set, and even when, the august football source of all, as Henry Winter in today's Times says that, they have to pick on the big boys now with even more severity, then that doesn't look good for City or Chelsea. Not that I really care about City or Chelsea. What I would say about the two cases that they're different is that Chelsea have opened up their books. The new owners have said, crikey, we found this dreadful mess. Premier League, please help us understand it and unravel it. So that may count in their favour. With regard to City, the charges go back forever and a day. They may argue in some of cases, there'll be some sort of statute of limitation, although formally there isn't one. UEFA has, I think, 3 or 5 years, and some of these go back further than that. City also have money, they have power, they will probably have better lawyers in inverted commas, and if they aren't treated in the same way as Everton have done with a points deduction, which would obviously proportionately see them get instantly relegated, then charges of the Premier League and the authorities being modestly corrupt will just stick further. Those City charges are going to take forever to come to light, though, 115 of them, as you say. Everton just won and resolved in a actually surprisingly short period of time. Quite convenient, again, for those who see Everton being treated unfairly, which there's a pretty strong case for.
I think Evertonians, though, Rodger, can take some comfort from the fact that on the pitch, actually what we've seen from Everton in recent weeks has been some good stuff. 3 wins from the past 4 away wins in the past 5. And I think you alluded before to the fact that with Sean Dyche, you've got a manager and a team now that are beginning to gel. And actually, although this is clearly unwelcome, performances on the pitch would indicate possibly that Everton may not need these 10 points come the end of the season. Had this have been last season, that could have been a very different story.
Yeah, it could. I mean, there's no doubt that the team's playing better and getting better results, okay? And there's no doubt that Dyche has got them playing together in a very effective way. The squad's thin, so an injury or two and things could change. There's a tough December, 7 fixtures coming up, and some quite challenging home fixtures against the likes of United, Chelsea, Newcastle and Manchester City.